Good morning. My name is Jane Castleman, and I'll be leading today's service. Reverend Matt Alspaugh will be presenting our message this morning. Our opening words this morning are by Hope Johnson, a Unitarian Universalist minister. We are one, a diverse group of proudly kindred spirits here not by coincidence, but because we choose to journey together. We are active and proactive. We care deeply, live our love as best we can. We are one, working, eating, laughing, playing, singing, storytelling, sharing and rejoicing, getting to know each other, taking risks, opening up, questioning, seeking, searching, trying to understand, struggling, making mistakes, paying attention, asking questions, listening and living our answers, learning to love our neighbors, learning to love ourselves, apologizing and forgiving with humility, being forgiven through grace, creating the beloved community. Together we are one. So I just want to welcome you with Live from Fellowship Hall. It's our LCUUF Sunday service. Our announcements were on a slideshow before the service. If you didn't see them, don't worry, not to worry, they were sent out by email yesterday with the order of service for today. A few notes. Our building is open to all for in-person services. We continue to offer our service on Zoom each Sunday for those who are unable to attend in person. Wearing masks in the fellowship building is required at this time. And now a special welcome to our visitors. If you're visiting with us for the first time or have returned or reconnected with us after a long absence, we invite you to say your name and tell us where you are from. Out here. Here we go.
Good morning. My name is Alice Mendoza, and we are visiting from Bainbridge Island, Washington, and house sitting for friends of ours who live just down the street. And this is
Carl Lindblom, married to Alice Mendoza, same town.
welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Are there masks at the welcome table? Yep.
If you are on Zoom and new to us, you can just raise your hand, use the raise hands feature, and we'll unmute you so that you can introduce yourselves. Is there anyone on Zoom?
Jane, it looks like we're all old timers.
Old timers, yeah. Just a brief note, we offer a wide variety of services on various topics presented by our members, by outside guests, as well as by our minister, Reverend Matt Alspaugh. So we hope you'll return to sample this variety of thought and belief. Our chalice lighting words today are by Scott Taylor, a Unitarian Universalist minister. May the flame we now kindle light the path back to our center, back to that place of belonging to what is true, what is deepest within, what knows us even before we know ourselves. And may our chalice remind us that we are held and welcomed whole without need to hide a single piece or part of who we are. Now let us light our chalice with these words that we sing together. Our opening hymn is Come Sing a Song with Me. Rise as you are willing and able, and join me in singing.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you home when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
Each week, we take time to remind ourselves we belong to a community that cares for each other. And we do this by sharing any significant joys or sorrows in our lives. If you have a joy or sorrow to share today, you can type it into the chat box if you're on Zoom, and we'll read those aloud later. But first, let us recall the joys, whatever you may be holding, celebrating, which evokes a feeling of joy or peace for yourselves or others. We'll start with the folks here. Are there any joys that people would like to share here in the room?
Hi, I'm Joan, and my joy is to be back home after having been gone for a while. And I've got here and found my friends from Bainbridge are here, and I'm responsible for getting them here late. But they're wonderful. And I'm just glad to be home and be able to be here with all of you.
Nobody's happy?
I'm Kat Barnett, and I'm joyful because this week we're going to leave and go and see my elder son and his wife who live in Massachusetts, and we've never been to Boston, so that's going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, neat.
I will share a joy, which is being here. I think one of the most moving parts of traveling can be best expressed in an Eleanor Roosevelt quote that I've been thinking every day since we've been here. And she said, "Perhaps the greatest gift that travel can be to me is getting acquainted with people, acquainted with places, and feeling at home in the world." And that really came home to me yesterday as we stopped and had lunch after I got my hand cast from falling off a bike at one of the little Coca-Cola tortilla taco stands and being with this whole family and feeling at home in the world. Just loved it.
And you, are there any joys on Zoom?
Yes, we have quite a few joys today. Lynn and Gary Cleek would like to light a candle in honor of their son, Bryce, who turns 36 today. Even though 9/11 always brings sadness, for them, it brings happiness as well. Fred and Mardell Harlan have two joys. First, they are delighted to be back in beautiful Ahihic. And second, they are very pleased that Mardell's health is much improved. And from Johannes, Johannes would like a candle of joy for all the nice people he's met at the LCUUF since he became a member. And finally, Lou and I'm Trudy, have a joy that our son will be visiting us this week. And we're excited about that.
Now let us voice our sorrows or concerns. Whatever you or the world may be holding that is in need of our healing and caring thoughts, you're welcome on Zoom to type sorrows into the chat box. But again, we'll start with the folks in the room. Are there those in the room who have sorrows they would like to share with us this morning?
Adele St. Pierre went to the States a few weeks ago to visit her brother, got COVID on the plane on the way there, has been isolated from everyone she wanted to see. Her symptoms were fairly mild, but then she got something else and she was in the hospital for 3 days, not COVID related, and it's turning into an extended trip while she recuperates, and she's anxious to get back here.
Are there any sorrows? Oh, thank you. Sorry.
I think you've been hearing about my 99-year-old mom, who I brought here in April, and she's had been doing really well. And they think she may have shingles, and it's painful, and she doesn't leave her room, and it's really hard to see her declining a bit. But they have medicine they're giving her, and hopefully she'll mend. But at her age, that's hard. So keep her in your prayers, please. Her name is Connie.
Are there any sorrows to be shared on Zoom?
Yes, we have two. Please light a candle of concern for Sue Kelly's sister-in-law, Lori. Lori has stage 4 pancreatic cancer and will be in Houston seeing doctors at MD Anderson. This is a little bit of a joy, as Sue's brother has been fighting Blue Cross Blue Shield for months to get this trip approved. And finally, Kathy Coaches asks you to please light a candle of concern and remembrance of those who lost their lives or loved ones on 9/11.
And this candle for our care team represents those sorrows that are too raw, too difficult for us to share aloud. So many of us have had losses, partners, children, grandchildren, pets, losses that remain present with us every day. So let us light this candle for all those unspoken sorrows.
If you've meditated much by yourself and in groups, you know that those are different experiences. If you were like me, that first group meditation might have been a bit scary. Am I going to embarrass myself? Is my stomach going to make weird, loud sounds? Will I be able to adjust my body if my legs go to sleep? And when will it end? When will it end? But if you get past all that, you've probably found that the group experience was deeper, more profound than meditating alone at home. There's something about being together in meditation with everybody doing the same thing. And so today we'll notice that. We'll do the same thing together, whether you're on Zoom or in the room. We'll do some simple breathing together, deep breathing followed by silence. So we'll take 6 deep breaths together. And during these breaths, take a moment and notice how the in-breath makes you just a little bit more alert and aware, and how a long out-breath allows you to relax. So I invite you to take a moment to get into a comfortable position for meditation, just sitting in your chair, maybe your feet nice and flat on the floor, and your hands in your lap or on the arms or wherever is comfortable. Then let's go. You might soften or close your eyes and take a first deep in breath. And out slowly. And in. And out. 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 And now a brief time of silence together. Thank you.
How to be alone. It all begins with knowing nothing lasts forever, so you might as well start packing now. In the meantime, practice being alive. There will be a party where you'll feel like nobody's paying you attention, and there will be a party where attention's all you'll get. What you need to do is to remember to talk to yourself between these parties. And again, There will be a day, a decade, where you won't fit in with your body, even though you're in the only body you're in. You need to control your habit of forgetting to breathe. Remember when you were younger and you practiced kissing on your arm? You were onto something then. Sometimes harm knows its own healing. Comfort knows its own intelligence. Kindness too. It needs no reason. There is a you telling you another story of you. Listen to her. Where do you feel anxiety in your body? The chest? The fist? The dream before waking? The head that feels like it's at the top of the swing, or the clutch of gut like falling and falling and falling and falling? It knows something. You're dying. Try to stay alive. For now, touch yourself. I'm serious. Touch yourself. Take your hand and place your hand someplace upon your body and listen to the community of madness that you are. You are such an interesting conversation. You belong here.
This responsive reading is attributed to Chief Noah South, or Chief Seattle, a leader of the Suquamish and Duwamish people. I will read the Roman type. You please read the italic type. This we know, the earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. All things are connected. Whatever befalls the earth, befalls the sons and daughters of the earth. We did not weave the web of life. We are merely a strand in it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves.
Do you belong here? I mean, do you belong in this country, in this town? For most of us, it's a tricky question. We're migrants here coming from other places, so belonging is shaded. It's a bit complicated. But at the same time, I've had questions about belonging even in my own country. I recall sitting with Liz and friends at an outdoor concert in North Carolina, listening to Appalachian music. And while I enjoyed the music, I realized that I really didn't belong to this mountain culture. As I thought, I realized that I also no longer belonged to my hometown of Houston either. I have almost no family there and few friends remain. So my own belonging is not about geographic roots. I'm not planted somewhere. My belonging has to be about something more than place, than mere place. And if it's not about place, what is belonging? And in the West, in the USA especially, there's a reverence for this idea of rugged individualism, the idea that people ought to take care of themselves. It's an idea that has origins in the frontier life. I think of the movie The Revenant, which is loosely based on the legendary story of a frontiersman, Hugh Glass, who after being attacked by a grizzly bear and left for dead, survives by his wits, crawling back to the nearest settlement. Or I think about the movie Into the Wild, where a young man goes on a backpacking adventure, ultimately going into the wilderness of Alaska. Or maybe the movie The Martian. Let me add a spotlight. Where an astronaut is abandoned on Mars and must use his wits to survive until he is ultimately rescued. These movies celebrate rugged individualism, but that is not how we are built. The rugged individualists are the exceptions. In two of these movies, for example, the thematic resolutions involve the protagonist returning to civilization from being separated from the human community. And in the third, Into the Wild, the protagonist fails to reconnect and dies of starvation. It turns out we're wired to connect. We're wired to belong. It's an evolutionary virtue to want to belong to groups of humans. Matthew Lieberman, a director of UCLA's Social Cognitive Neuroscience Lab, explains our need to belong, to be human beings as a result of our evolution. He says, I quote, "Our sociality is woven into a series of bets that evolution has laid down again and again throughout mammalian history. Those bets come in the form of adaptations that are selected because they promote survival and reproduction. These adaptations intensify the bonds we feel with those around us and increase our capacity to predict what is going on in the minds of others so we can better coordinate and cooperate with them. The pain of social loss and the ways that an audience's laughter can influence us are no accidents. To the extent that we can characterize evolution as designing our modern brains, this is what our brains are wired for, reaching out to and interacting with others. These are design features, not flaws. These social adaptations are central to making us the most successful species on Earth. And so we very much want to be part of families, communities, societies, some network of interconnection that is bigger than ourselves. It's innate, it's part of our nature. But in our desire to belong, we can get things wrong. Researcher and lecturer Brene Brown points out in this short video that the opposite of belonging is not necessarily isolation, but fitting in. That is, modifying who you really are in order to be a part of a group.
We're wired for love. We're hardwired for belonging. It's in our DNA. But let me tell you what belonging is. The opposite of belonging from the research is fitting in. That's the opposite of belonging. Fitting in is assessing and acclimating. Here's what I should say, be. Here's what I shouldn't say. Here's what I should avoid talking about. Here's what I should dress like, look like. That's fitting in. Belonging is belonging to yourself first. Speaking your truth, telling your story, and never betraying yourself for other people. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. And that's vulnerable.
In her book, The Gifts of Imperfection, Brene Brown defines belonging this way, and I quote, "Belonging is the innate human desire to be part of something larger than us. Because this yearning is so primal, we often try to acquire it by fitting in and by seeking approval, which are not only hollow substitutes for belonging, but often barriers to it. Because true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance." Matt here. Now, this makes sense to me, provided you have a pretty clear sense of your authentic self already. Some of us, like Brene Brown, certainly do have this solid North Star sense of self. But I suspect that many of us are far less clear about our authentic selves. We're works in progress. I certainly know I am. In that poem, How to Belong, no, it's actually How to Be Alone, suggests the complexity of being such works in progress. Otama tells us, there is a you telling you a story of you. Listen to her. But oftentimes that's not easy, isn't it? To listen to that still small voice inside, or maybe those multiple voices. Otama continues, listen to the community of madness that you are. You are such an interesting conversation. Now that certainly feels right to me. For most of us, our authenticity is a flowing, changing, emerging thing. In these cases, we may choose to belong, whether in a marriage or a partnership, an organization, a community, even this fellowship, and in a part as a way to get more clear about who we are as humans. Most of us don't decide to belong as fully formed individuals. We decide to belong because we hope that belonging will connect us and make us stronger, wiser, better people. So I think belonging is a two-way street. We seek to belong because evolutionarily, we understand at a deep level the benefits of being part of something bigger, a partnership, a group, a society. There will be benefits to belonging. We accept the possibility that we might be changed, hopefully for the better, as a consequence of belonging. But we seek also to serve, to support, even to change that larger thing to which we belong. We want to contribute, even as we receive benefits. We know that there is an opportunity for us to do our part to improve that which we belong to, even when the fit is imperfect. Let me give you an example from my own world. I belong to a men's group here in Ajijic in this area. It's part of a worldwide organization of men's groups. I began to attend during my first year here in Ajijic. And one of the concerns I had with the group at the very beginning was its use of ritual ideas from Native American traditions, calling the directions, the use of animal names, smudging, that sort of stuff. These rituals have long been part of men's groups, and yet they made me a little bit uncomfortable at the start. And I even considered not joining this group. But I stayed even with these doubts. Maybe I chose to fit in. But I'm happy to see that now there is a healthy internal discussion within the international organization about appropriation of Native American ritual elements, about whether the group has the right to use these things and what might need to change. And even though I'm not agitating for change from the beginning, I'm happy to see that change is happening and happy to be part of that change. Now, I think this experience is an example of healthy belonging. Healthy belonging involves two-way conversation, two-way involvement, two-way care. I think when belonging stops being two-way and becomes one-way, it can become toxic. We feel compelled to change ourselves, to fit in, as Brahms suggests, in order to belong. There is little or no opportunity to creatively contribute our efforts. Instead, we are just expected to mold ourselves into the relationships or into the organization. I'm sure many of us can think of political parties, churches, workplaces that are like this. Or maybe we've known of marriages or families that are like this. The message, usually from people in power, is my way or the highway. But healthy belonging doesn't work that way. To understand this two-way belonging, let's consider belonging to a religious organization like this fellowship. Al Winseman is a Gallup poll researcher. He studied why people go to church, and he described his findings in a book, Growing an Engaged Church. He concludes that people choose to belong to a church when they can answer positively, affirmatively, 2 questions. And now I want to slow down here and allow you to think for yourself about these questions in the context of this fellowship. Or maybe if you're a visitor, maybe some other congregation you know. So the first question is, am I valued here? And the second question is, do I make a meaningful contribution? So belonging is about being valued, about having your authentic self seen and appreciated, feeling like you can let your hair down, relax, not worry about how you come off or whether you fit in. And in return, there's a space for you to offer something of yourself, your real self, not feeling pigeonholed into some typecast role just because that's what everyone expects of you. Winseman suggests that as people go deeper, they make a kind of emotional commitment to the congregation. In his words, they become engaged. This happens when they move beyond what you do at church or at the congregation to how you feel about the congregation. According to Winseman, engagement happens when you see clear, relevant answers to these 4 questions. What do I get? What do I give? Do I belong? And how can we grow? I invite you to think about these questions, you who actively attend LCUUF, whether you've joined as a member or not. Consider, what do I get? What do I give? Do I belong? And how can we grow? So that's about a congregation. Now, what about belonging to an identity group? And here I'm talking about identities like race, nationality, gender, orientation, things like that. We don't really have choices about our identities. In essence, we're born that way. What does belonging look like then? Activist and writer Adrienne Marie Brown notes an important distinction between identity and belonging. She talks of her identity as a Black person. She says, being Black for many of us means having unspeakable trauma at our backs, having been wrenched from our ancestral and tribal homelands, languages, songs, the earth we knew, and surviving 10, 12 generations of torture, misery, violence, rape, child loss, and dehumanization. Somewhere inside of that, we claimed each other across history and language and cultural distinctions. We aren't the only peoples who were collapsed into an identity by shared experiences of trauma and external reduction. At a minimum, identity can be a crucial space from which to organize across shared experience. But identity doesn't equal or promise community. Community is a place to practice and participate in care, attention, knowing and being known, being protected, having room to make mistakes and still belong, not just allowed to be here, but be valuable, to heal, to recover. Community feels responsible for each other. Community is a choice. So ends her reading. So my take on this is that certainly our identities, race, nationality, gender, orientation, and so on, are all important. But we don't belong to an identity in the same way that we belong to a community. Identity doesn't have the two-wayness of belonging to a community. As Adrienne Brown points out, at the core, community is a choice. So while identity isn't really the essence of belonging, that is, we don't automatically get the benefits of belonging to a community from our identity. Our identities do affect how we see belonging. So having considered identity and belonging, let's take on the responsive reading which we read together earlier. This reading, in fact, was out of the UU hymnal, Singing the Living Tradition. And while I like the sentiment, this is a problematic reading. It wasn't written in 1854 by Chief Seattle, who you see here, but rather in 1971 by Ted Perry, a screenwriter for a film about ecology. Still, I think Perry's words, "The earth does not belong to us, we belong to the earth," make a point. We can't really choose to not belong to the earth. It's a core identity of all of us as creatures of the world, as earthlings. And how we identify with belonging to the earth defines our connection with one another and with the web of life. Environmental writer Jeremy Lent tells us, ultimately, our values arise from our identity. If someone defines themselves as an isolated individual, they will feel entitled to pursue their happiness at the expense of others. Someone who identifies primarily with their nation will have no qualms about putting up barriers to prevent others from entering. If your identity is based on a fundamentalist religious creed, you may be ready to martyr yourself for the cause. And if you identify primarily with all life, you're likely to devote your existence to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. So, if we're willing to claim our identity as living beings, we see our connection as with other living beings. We relate to them. We are part of the web of life. You might say that we belong to a larger shared being, a being with a capital B, a being to which all life belongs. And if we deeply own that identity, we will feel driven to care for those beings and for the earth. Can't we just all belong? Maybe it's not so simple. Our identities are a starting point, but they are just a starting point. We want to be active in our belonging. We want to relate to and care for those around us, to our communities, to that which is larger than ourselves. In belonging, we don't want to sacrifice who we are just to fit in. In belonging, we hope we become stronger, wiser, better, even more authentic people. In belonging, we want to offer our gifts to care for and support those to which we belong. Belonging is part of our nature as humans. So let's take our belonging seriously. Let's belong in all our various ways, the best that we can.
This is the time in our service when we ask that you remember that we share our gifts here through pledging and donations. Instructions for payments to the fellowship are on a slide during the announcements before the service every week. For the people here at the fellowship, we pass a basket. And while you're considering your gifts to the fellowship, remember that each month LCUUF donates 5,000 pesos or more to an organization in our Lakeside community. We share 1/2 of the offering collected at the fellowship each week with that organization. For this month, September, we are supporting Tepewa Centro Comunitario. This organization serves people in the Tepewa barrio of Chapala, one of the poorest barrios in the state of Jalisco. In addition to food assistance, the Comunitario provides medical and dental care, teaches reading and English as a second language, and helps women start small businesses by teaching them sewing skills. If you're not attending the fellowship in person, please donate to Share the Basket when you pay your pledge. Donate to Share the Basket separately, or indicate what part of your donation is for Share the Basket. Offering has now been given and gratefully received. Our closing hymn is For All That Is Our Life. Please rise and join me in singing.
We belong in so many ways. We belong to our authentic, evolving, growing selves. We belong to each other as friends, lovers, family. We belong to our communities, societies, nations, and they belong to us. We belong to this world and ultimately just maybe to that mysterious other beyond this world. Let us come with praise and thanks for belonging to this life and for the rich network of belongings of which we are a part. Blessed be.
Let us extinguish our chalices with these words which we read together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts and share with all the world.
I'd like to thank our guest artists today, Suzanne Bullock, Areli Medelis, and Robert Teamy, for being with us here today. Please give them a big round of applause. And so they will close the service with a performance of the finale from the Brahms Clarinet Trio.